now that you are done with your warm-up, you want to go ahead and pass those forward and collect them, turn them into the box up front. And remember those 4 functions of epithelial tissue. What are we going to go ahead and have? We're going to have protection, absorption, secretion, and excretion. And then those 3 common places we're going to find that tissue in is around organ surfaces, covering, and also in glands. So make sure you've turned that in, that you had your name on the top. You filled it in to the best of your ability. If you missed a couple, that's all right. We'll just go ahead and turn those in. I'll look through them later today. All right. So for today, we're going to be taking notes. So if you haven't gone ahead and opened up your binder, you should do so. You want to be in Chapter 5. We're going to identify tissues as either epithelial, connective, or muscle tissue. So we're going to look at those 2 new ones today, connective and muscle. By the end of class, I'm hoping you'll know the 6 different types of connective tissue, as well as the 3 types of muscle tissue. So to just go ahead and begin us off, we have connective tissue. It's the most abundant and widely distributed tissue in the body. Now, this page right here, you don't have any space to go ahead and write in your notes, so you may want to just put a couple of bullet points right above the general characteristics or general classifications of connective tissue. You can put this at the top of the page. The biggest thing that I want you to note about connective tissue is that it has very few cells and a lot of intercellular matrix. Now, if you remember, that matrix is like the cytoplasm that we find within the cell, but this time it's the jelly-like or solid-like structure around the cells that make up a tissue. So connective tissue is opposite from epithelial tissue in that it has a lot of matrix there. So we're going to find a lot of that fluid or that gel-like substance or that solid substance within connective tissue versus epithelial tissue only having very little intercellular matrix in between the cells so that those cells are crammed together and there's tons of them versus very few in connective tissue. And we'll notice as we go through the different types of connective tissue, we'll see that there are a lot of different appearances and functions, and that'll make more sense as we look at the different types of connective tissue. So the biggest piece that I wanted you to write down here is that there are very few cells in an intercellular matrix with lots of that fluid that they're going to go ahead and be in versus the epithelial tissue. All right. So if you didn't get it, if I go too fast in this recording, please know that these will be on my website tonight, so you'll be able to find them. If you get lost as we're going through the slides, you can go ahead and catch yourself up. All right, our next one, we're going to go ahead and classify connective tissue. There are 6 major types of tissue, and it's classified a lot differently than epithelial tissue. With epithelial tissue, we're looking at the layers and also the shape of the cells, okay? In connective tissue, we actually have different types. So our very first type is dense connective tissue, and we're going to look at each of these more in depth. So dense connective tissue, that makes sense. It's very, very strong. It's thick, all those kinds of things, versus that loose or areolar connective tissue, that's the next type, is going to not be as dense, naturally why it's called loose, okay? Our third one there, adipose or fat tissue, you may want to go ahead and make a vocab card for adipose. If you haven't heard that term before, we're going to use it to describe fat tissue. So we won't call it fat tissue, we'll call it adipose tissue. The next classification for connective tissues is cartilage, the stuff we find in our nose or in our ears, in our rib cage. The next one is bone. That's one of the cool ones. You don't necessarily think of bone as connective tissue. And then, of course, the other really weird one is blood. Blood is a connective tissue. Now, I had a student ask, why on earth is blood considered a connective tissue? So one of the biggest reasons for that is blood has that one major characteristic that connective tissues have, and that is there are very few cells and a lot of intercellular matrix, okay? So we see that with blood there. And also there's some specific functions for connective tissues that blood goes ahead and helps with. So again, we have dense connective tissue, loose or areolar connective tissue, adipose tissue or fat tissue, cartilage, bone, and blood.